LSU's ahead 6-0 in the first inning with nobody out. Then we have other events to take care of. This is certainly.
Wait, we didn't hear that.
You did? We're going to take my plane tonight. Anyone down this way didn't hear? But anyway, thank you very much for coming this evening. This is the fourth of our series of local folks talking about important things in the history of Webster Parish. So this evening we have someone who is very special, who's been a supporter of the museum for many, many years. And I hope you also will continue with your support of the museum. Schelley, that's a long enough speech where you are. Thanks for coming.
Yes, Corlu, that is the truth. First of all, I would like everyone to turn off their cell phones, Corlu. Okay. If everybody would please turn off their cell phones, I greatly appreciate it. I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight. I know it's a little bit warm in here and the air's doing all it can do. We got a really good crowd tonight, so that either means y'all didn't really want to watch the ball game or you wanted to hear Mr. Turner really bad. So I really appreciate y'all coming out. Tomorrow is a big day, as well as tonight. Tomorrow is going to be our first day open for the museum. Kind of not a trial and error thing, I think, but it's a long time coming, and so we're really glad that tomorrow's finally here. We're going to be open from Tuesday through Friday, from 10 a.m. till 1 p.m., closed an hour for lunch, back at 2, and open till 4. Saturdays will be open from 10 to 12, and also be open by appointment and for special meetings. So all you got to do is call me, and I'll run down there and show it to you. But we're real excited about tomorrow, and for this month, we're waiving the admission fees. So gather up a bunch of folks, and y'all come down and see what we got. And I mean, it's just going to be such a wonderful thing. Larry was down there today working. We worked a lot this past week, and y'all are going to be real excited to see it tonight. And we're going to stay open probably for about an hour after we're through here. Lou has got the gift basket cards. If you didn't fill out one, you can raise your hand. She'll get you a card and put it in the hopper. We've got a real nice gift basket on Normandy Beach and 40s music and all kinds of good stuff in the basket. We've also got some items back there for sale. We've got the last 3 discs for sale that you can pick up tonight before you leave. And like I said, be sure to visit the museum tonight after this is over. I'm going to let John Egan introduce our guest. And we're really glad our guest is here. He had a little timing problem last week, and they got him worked out, and I think he's just so excited that he was able to make it tonight.
Schelley says, I'll keep coming. I'm not sure what this is. I come from the time before people at the meeting, so that's amazing. When I give my kids in classes, I'm supposed to call them kids, assignment to write, they hate it because they always come up and say, what am I supposed to say? And tell the guy to get 75 words and they pull their hair out. Had a different problem tonight because when I was asked to introduce our speaker tonight, my question was, how do I limit what I say? So many different ways that I can relate to introducing him. Starting from the time I was a small child, probably my daddy's best friend. So I've known him my entire life. And in the First Baptist Church, in every capacity of leadership, from deacons to Sunday school, to making balloon animals for the kids. I mean, everything that touched the life of the church, he was there. I could introduce him to some of y'all probably knew him from his job. It was in job service. All the people he touched in the years there. Then one of the biggest Louisiana Tech supporters yesterday at Elizabeth School. Louisiana Tech could have Personally, he always encouraged me when I was trying to work for my various degrees, and some of them I didn't make it to, but still, he was always there to encourage me. And, you know, you could go on and on and see what's my little card here. It's bad to get old. Okay, one of the obvious ones before I get to the last thing I want to say that he doesn't like to talk about is the war hero. The greatest generation did save our country, and he played a very heroic part in that. But the last way I want to introduce him is kind of an odd way. I want to introduce him as royalty, but I'll explain it at least 3 ways really quickly. One of them I already told you that he's a child of the king, so he's royalty in that way. But 2 ways that come closer to our association with what we hear about. Back at the end of the Civil War, when the dreaded Republicans came here. Now, I like to get that now. When I first started teaching these, everybody else was Democrat, now I'm a few Democrats. But anyway, when the dreaded Republicans came, Minden had been trying for 35 years to be a parish seat. Meant a lot. Everybody has to come here for marriage license, everybody has to come into town. So, 3 people were instrumental in getting Minden to be a parish seat. 2 of them were those nasty Republicans we won't mention. One scallywag and one carpetbagger. But the 3rd one was a man named John Sidney Kelly, Mr. Turner's great-grandfather, the legislator from here when Webster Parish was created. And so, if there's a royal family in Webster Parish, pretty close to it. The second one, even more important, is when I'm talking about those days of the 4 people meetings, which were mentioned here earlier, that Mr. Turner, after Dorcheat Museum, had kind of stalemated for a few years. Back in the days when some of y'all may remember about the turn of the century. First time I think I've used that since it's now in my lifetime since the turn of the century. But I'm talking 2000, down in those time frames. Mr. Turner put more blood, sweat, and tears than anybody else into getting us where we were in the situation of the Creighton Museum, the Creighton Hardware Building. And so this fantastic museum that you're going to get a chance to see is a product of his hard work. So I've taken enough of his time already, but please give a warm welcome and listen intently to Mr. George Turner.
Okay, I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to such a good group. When Sherry asked me to come and talk with you, I said, I don't believe there'd be hardly enough folks around that want to hear what I have to say. She said, well, we've been having a crowd of about 200. I said, well, count on a smaller number this time. I won't be able to draw that many, but I thank you for coming out, and I want to thank Schelley for asking me. I hope that I will have some things to tell you that will be of interest to you. I want to thank Thad and his officers for the wonderful progress that has been made in the Dorcheat Historical Unit. I don't want to say a reorganization, but there for a while, the History Association was not having regular meetings and had become kind of inactive. And Kilpatrick Life Insurance gave a building before they built a new one over there to the Historical Association, and that's when I become interested in it, and we kind of got things going by Richard Campbell and Charlie Oldham and Marcus Wren, Ms. Monk, and I shouldn't have started naming those who were instrumental in getting them. Charlie made arrangements for us to start meeting down at the Creighton Hardware. We met down there for a couple of 3 years, and after that, it kind of went inactive again until Thad and his officers took over and got it going. And Thad, I want to compliment you and your officers on the progress you've made. It's just wonderful. I want to assure you that I appreciate the publicity. My name was mentioned in the write-up. I appreciate Schelley mentioning my name, and she referred to me as a hero. I'm not a hero. I was drafted into the Army, and I did what I was told to do, and so there was millions of fellas in the same boat that I was in. They were drafted and they did what they were told to do to the best of their ability, and so I'm no more of a hero than the rest of the fellas. I just did what I was told to do. But I took my thoughts from the newspaper article. Schelley said she wanted me to talk about early days, pioneer days. You see, I'm 88 years old, soon be 89. I've been around a good while, and I want to say that I want to tell a group that it's not what I did that you ought to be listening to, but it's what God did in my life. I want to tell you about some of the experiences that have come to me and things that I did. She wanted to know about the pioneer life. Well, I brought some pictures of early pioneer days. If you want to look at them, take time. Charlie, you need to put a little more light for old folks, senior adults. There's not enough light for them to see the pictures and read the articles that I brought there. I brought along a number of articles that relate to it. John mentioned my great-great-grandfather talking about pioneers. John Sidney Kidd left Georgia when he was 22 years old in a wagon train. I guess the wagon train was sponsored by the Manzingos. You heard tell of many Manzingos around in this area. There was a wagon train, and my great-great-grandfather joined that wagon train. He left Georgia with one, he called him a personal servant. What it was slave. That was back during the slave days in 1848. This city of Minden was about 13 years, founded about 13 years before he moved in here. And when he moved in this area, he settled on some land north of Minden, about four miles north of Minden. And he got, from a government, 3 land grants to make up his farm up there north of Minden. And there are many things I could tell you about John Sidney Kidd, but the main thing I want to mention is that he had 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls, and the boys died in their childhood. But he had 4 girls who married local people. One of the girls married a Turner, one married a Stewart, one married a Culberson, and one married a Hodges of Cotton Valley. So you can see how it is that I have some many relatives around in this area Virginia Fox, always been interested in the Historical Association, and she's one of my cousins. You see, she's a steward. And so you talk around and I find the Manzingos, my great-granddaddy married Manzingo, the girl that he started courting when the wagon train was coming in from Georgia. They got introduced to the Manzingos. He, after about a year here, he married one. So the Zingos and the Stewarts and the Cullersons and all of it, just my kinfolks. I claim kin to all of them. Lots of them I don't even know, but if they got that name, I claim kin to them. Well, I want to get into the early childhood. My daddy, John Killing Turner, bought some land out north of town and had a little small farm out there. And I was born on a farm. Daddy was a farmer to start with. Then he and my Uncle Ferris Turner bought a groundhog mill, and he sold lumber from this groundhog mill to the big mill down here in Minden before it burned. You know, we had a big mill down here that was operating until 1918, and somehow it was burned, and my daddy sold his lumber to that mill, and Mr. Doug Lunsford, I don't know whether you remember Doug Lunsford Dairy out north of town. He would haul the lumber from the mill to the big mill here in Minden. And Mr. Lunsford operated a dairy. We had 4 cows that we milked and sold our milk to Mr. Doug Lunsford Dairy. He didn't need the milk as bad as he did the cream. He had a separator that he would separate the cream from the milk, and we'd take the milk back home and we'd give it to the pigs. It was skim milk, what we call skim milk now. Wasn't much demand for skim milk back in those days, so we give it to the pigs. That gives you a little idea about my growing up. I went to Minden High School here in an old 3-story red brick building. The school board office was on the same ground as the high school, and I had teachers like Miss Effie Turner. Some of you folks may remember that we go down memory lane. Miss Effie Turner, Mr. Jimmy Pitcher, Mr. J.E. Harper, Miss Sadie Reynolds, Miss Maud Bullock, and you might remember some of those older ladies. They might have been your teacher too. But it gives you time frame that I'm talking about. Those ladies are not with us. Miss Betty Nolan, I remember Miss Betty, and those teachers that have gone on now. Some of the chores that I did when I was growing up on the farm was that we had to drive up the cows, we called it. After school, the first thing we did was go to the home and get a cold biscuit out of the warming cabinet on the stove, and then we'd head out to drive up the cow. At that time, they didn't have any stock laws, no fences, and as soon as the farmers finished with their crop gathering, we'd turn the cows out. out of the pasture we're talking about. They'd wander around through the fields, and we had a bell on the bell cow. And when we got in from school, my brother and I would get ready to go drive up the cows because we had to milk them, take the milk to Lunsford's dairy, and you couldn't run them. In other words, you didn't rush a cow, you just kind of let them take their time and come on back up to the barn. If you run them, it had an adverse effect on the amount of milk you got. So Daddy said to drive them slowly up to the barn, and we'd milk them. Anyway, that gives you an idea about the chores. I had to split wood, bring in. We had a wood stove in the kitchen, and we had to take our bath in number 3 wash tub. We had the tub in behind the stove in the wall of the house, and we'd take a shower there, a bath in that tub where it was nice and warm. One of the things that you might be able to relate to is getting your lessons up by lamplight. Not too long ago, the electricity went off, and I had to light a lamp to get around the house. And you'd be surprised if you haven't tried to get around with a lamp lately, what a little bit of light that lamp puts off. Just think, I had to get up my lessons by lamplight. We had a couple of lamps, and we didn't have any problems there. I don't remember getting in any trouble about not getting up to lessons. That's when the teachers still give lessons to get it home at night. I don't think my great-grandchildren, I don't think, get up many lessons at night now. I had lessons nearly every night, and we got them up by lamplight. But I was thinking about we read in the history book about Abraham Lincoln. He got his up by light from the fireplace, so he was in worse shape than mine. But anyway, we'd get up our lessons by lamplight, and that was kind of hard. My daddy had this sawmill, groundhog sawmill, a little small operation. And when the big mill burned down here, he didn't have a place to sell the lumber, so he and my Uncle Ferris, you might remember Mr. Ferris Turner in the lumber yard down here, moved over to Long Springs. Now, some of you may not know where Long Springs is located, but if you know, you go out to Dorcheat Road, out here at Gillark, you cross the Edinay Railroad track. Just keep right on across the tracks and go on up about 5 miles, and the Edinay Railroad crosses the Dorcheat Road a second time. Now, Long Springs is located there where the Edinay Railroad crosses the second time. Big high hill. I don't know whether you've been out there lately or not, but as the road goes up the hill to the top, and that's where it's called Long Springs. And so I was going to tell you about this, how I got the name. I got a newspaper article here, but Charlie, you don't have enough light for me to see it. So I can't read it like I wanted to do. But anyway, I'll tell you about how I got that name. A fellow from Virginia in 19 1820, moved his family and his slaves and all of his property down to Athens, up here in Clayton Parish. And he got to looking around after he moved down here, wandering around, and he come across this high hill out here called Long Springs nowadays, and he liked that location a lot better than he did Athens. So he moved his family onto that area. It was not long after he moved down there that he discovered a couple of big springs coming out of that hill. And he got the idea that that would be a good place to have a kind of a resort, because he felt like that the water coming out of these springs had curative value to it. And he also, the account goes that Indians that day come and camped out there and drank the water and took baths in those springs. And he got the idea of building some little cottages there and having a kind of a resort, which he did. He put up some cottages and had some tents that the people brought to camp out there and just have a regular little resort area. And so it went over real good. And so finally, he decided to build a hotel there, and which was successful. They had big plantation folks come and spend some time, a little vacation time there. The Indians come and put up the tents and had time off from their wandering around, and it was successful. And he finally built a hotel on the area, and it was successful until 1920, not 25. 1925, they had a fire and destroyed part of it, and it tore the rest of it down. So now, there's no resort area in the area out there, but that's a bit of the history of Long Springs. How it was named after this fellow, David Long, who come out of Virginia with his slaves. He acquired 1,400 acres there and did a lot of farming, had a lot of slaves, and slaves planted cotton crops and cared for the farm, and that was how he got the name. After my daddy moved the mill from out here on Louisville Road over to Long Springs, we used to go walking out there. I was about 6 years old. I don't know, the place was not operating at the time, but some of the residents from here in Minden used to go out there because it was a recreation area. And you may remember Mr. Joe Miller, who lived in this house right here behind the courthouse, and his daughter, Ms. Inhabit, she passed away here several years ago. She told me that she used to go out to Long Springs to socials pretty frequently, and that Mr. Joe Miller, her daddy, was in a band that was organized to entertain the folks who come out to the. So it was a pretty well-known place in the area, but now It's all grown up. I've been out there a time or two to see. I can't even locate the springs anymore. It's all so grown up and changed. You can't tell much about it. I went up to the place where the hotel was, and I couldn't find any evidence much. It's all grown up. Wander went up there and found some artifacts, but I imagine I was in too big a hurry to look for anything much. But it's all grown up now, and no evidence of a resort area out there anymore. But they did have a cemetery out there, but it was across the railroad tracks. I went out there and found that. But it's all grown up too. So we just have more or less forgotten about the Long Springs area as being a resort area. Now, one thing that Schelley asked me to talk about was my war experience, which I have to give the Lord credit for taking care of me. He looked after me and brought me back home as a result of the prayers of my family, my mother and daddy and my wife. They prayed for me regularly, and the Lord answered their prayer, and I got to come back. I had some wonderful experiences in the military, and I had some pretty bad times. I wouldn't want to go through the experience again, but I was glad that I did have the opportunity to go and serve our country. If you recall, we had a Pearl Harbor Day on December the 7th, 1941. Well, I was drafted into the Army 2 months later, in February of 1942. And I got a picture of the group of men that went with me. I mentioned these that you might know. You might know and remember Richard Garrison. He was our tax assessor, and he was elected several times, and Richard was a fine man, and he went with me. You might also remember Tinsley Connell. Tinsley was an insurance man. He was a little bit old for the draft. I believe he was close to 40 years old, 35, something like that. But he wanted to go. He went with us. And you might remember Dove Inabnet. He went with us, and Shirley Crawford. There's just some I call off the top of my head. Talk about recalling things off the top of your head. Remind me of a remark that I made to Jerry Woodard. You know Jerry and Jack. I told Jerry I was coming down. I was going to kind of talk off the top of my head. She said, "You must have been doing a lot of that, so your head is kind of getting slick up there." But anyway, we went down to Camp Livingston. It's not camp there anymore. Beauregard is a camp at Alexandria, but they had this Camp Livingston at that time. And I was inducted. We rode the bus down there, and Mr. Harry Andrews was on the draft board, and I got a picture of the unit, and Harry standing over to the side. And they had told me his daddy wanted to go too, but he didn't get to go. So anyway, we went down, and nothing exciting happened at Camp Livingston, because we were only there about a week, and getting inducted and getting our uniform and things like that didn't take long. My wife come down to visit me that weekend, and I was glad to see her. She rode the bus down, and I had been selected to be on KP. I had been there three days when she got there, and she located me, and they gave me time off from the pots and pans and peeling potatoes, and I went and visited with her a little bit. But the next week they sent us to Camp Clayton, which was about 30 miles south of Alexandria. And they were reorganized in the 82nd Infantry Division. You remember Sergeant York was in the 82nd Infantry Division during World War I. And it had been inactivated at that time, but they were reactivating that division. And their insignia is AA, and that stands for All America. They had men in the division supposedly from every state in the Union. And they were reactivating that division, and they sent Richard Garrison and me and Tinsley Connell down to be part of the reorganization and reactivating of the division. So we got our basic training in Camp Clayton, and I got a pillow top there, it's mighty pretty. I got it from my wife, and if you want to look at it, you can see all that display there, stuff that relates to my talk. But anyway, we've got our basic training there, and in September, now this was in February, in September, we finished our basic training, and the Army Department sent word down that they had decided to make 2 airborne divisions out of that infantry division. So you had 82nd Airborne and 101st Airborne. Well, we couldn't train for airborne operation down at Camp Clayton, so they sent us up to Fort Bragg. We got up there in October and started our training, primarily for airborne type training. I was in a glider unit, and Richard and Tinsley were also assigned to glider units, and they were paratroop units, and so it just wasn't satisfactory. You didn't have a place to train airborne. So they sent us to Fort Bragg. We got up there and spent about a year at Fort Bragg training in different facets of airborne. For example, how to put a Jeep in a glider. Gliders don't have a motor on it. It's pulled by a C-47 airplane, and it's a long tow rope. Well, how would you put that thing in there and then the plane come flying by and jerk you off the ground like that, and then keep that Jeep tied down so it don't fall out of the glider? Well, we got that type of training, how to tie down equipment, howitzers, and all the equipment we had, and had to take it into combat. Took us about a year to do that. We went up, they sent us up to Camp Shanks, New York, to go overseas. We went up there, and in a couple of weeks we were on a boat headed for England. And took us, it really took my unit about 45 days to get over to England. Now, ordinarily, it would take about 10 days. But the ship that they sent for us to ride over or go over on broke down on us, and we had to put in at St. John, Newfoundland. We went up there and spent about 30 days doing calisthenics and taking hikes and things like that. And they sent another ship over to pick us up. We went in there and we continued to do the same type of training in England that we had been doing at Fort Bragg. Because the Army officials was not ready to go into Europe at the time. So when they finally got around to D-Day, they loaded us up and on ships, LSTs, and we went to Europe, to Normandy. Went into Normandy on Utah Beach. Yeah. Now you've seen in television programs mostly action on Omaha Beach. We didn't go in on Omaha. Our assignment had been further up the Normandy coast, and so my unit went in on Normandy Beach. On Utah Beach, and the Army made the decision that we would go in that way. We only had the paratroopers went in that night before, and they had gotten cut up pretty bad, and it was a bad deal for them. But when we went in on the beach, there's plenty of firepower there, but it wasn't like going in, jumping into Utah Beach. Anyway, we got in the war zone pretty fast. Went on up to the first big town that we've come upon and we wanted to capture was Carrington. It was a pretty good sized town and kind of a hub, transportation hub town. And I got a paper there saying something about the action at Carrington, and for the action there, the Army gave me a Bronze Star. Then we went pushing on up to Cherbourg. That took us we went in on June 6th. That was a Friday week. You know, I didn't hear much out of the newspapers about June 6th. But we went in on June 6th, and by July the 15th, we was in Cherbourg, and it had been decided that we would go back to England, be resupplied, and get more troop personnel to add to our division. And it was decided that we would go into Holland. Holland, you remember, was an airborne operation. From my standpoint, Utah Beach was sea landing. Holland was air landing. You remember the account during the Revolutionary War where Paul Revere said that if the British are coming by land, I'll be up in the church tower holding one lantern. If the British troops are coming by sea, I'll be up there holding 2 lanterns. Remember that? You studied that in history. Well, I had the opportunity to go into battle by land, by sea, and by air. The British troops didn't have that opportunity during the Revolutionary War. But I went in 3 different ways there. And so this time we were going in by air into Holland, which we did, but it was a rough time. We started out with my unit, 39 gliders, loaded down with troops and material, jeeps and howitzers and so forth. 39 gliders going in. As soon as we got over the English Channel, the fog set in on us. We could hardly see the tow plane ahead of us. And if you in a glider being towed, you got to keep your eye on the tow plane so you know whether you're way over here flying or way over here where you couldn't see it. The fog was so thick. We lost many of our gliders in the channel. When we got over the mainland, the enemy forces evidently was expecting us because we lost many of our gliders before we got to the landing zone. Just show you how the Lord was taking care of me. Out of the 39 gliders that we left England with, only 12 got to the landing zone. And I was one of the 12. So I considered that a privilege and an opportunity. We were in Holland in contact with the enemy 72 days. And they decided after that to pull us. Well, I'll tell you about something that happened in Holland. You remember I mentioned Tyndall Connell being in the same unit. Tyndall's glider didn't make the landing zone, but they landed safely in the field, and one of the Dutch underground members come running out to the glider and brought Tinsley and his crew back to safety in an old farmhouse. Now, you all know who that person was. It was Leo Elshot. If you remember Leo Elshot, he passed away not too long ago. He has children living here in Minden now, in business, and some of his relatives are still with us. But Leo come out and rescued or saved Tinsley Common and his crew, put them in the farmhouse and took care of them so the enemy didn't get them. And as a result of that and appreciation, Tinsley filled out the necessary paperwork, got Leo over here, and Thad Leo worked for Anders Motor, you know, as a shop foreman. And so I thought you might be interested in that. I was up on the front lines when Leo and his bunch come through, but I didn't get to visit with them because they were taking them on back to the rest area, or interviewing and so forth. Anyway, after 72 days in Holland, we got this order to go back to Reims, France, to an old World War II camp called Marmelade. And there, and we were all looking forward to a Christmas holiday after 72 days in contact with the enemy. We were ready to rest a while. But no sooner than we got there, we got the word that we better be getting things ready to go back, because the Germans had mounted an offensive, as they were calling the Battle of the Bulge. You might have heard of the Battle of the Bulge. So on the 17th of December, we got to rest about 2 weeks, I guess. On the 17th of December, we started to move out by truck up to Bastogne, which is a city in Belgium. And I believe Virginia Fox has been up there to Bastogne. I never got to go back over there to Europe. But anyway, we moved up and got in there at night, took up our positions the next morning. And while up there, Bastogne, we got surrounded as a division. And we spent Christmas, December Christmas in 44 in Bastogne. And shortly after that, a few days later, Patton pushed through and rescued the division. We held it because we were instructed that it was a vital transportation hub, and we need to hold it at all costs, which we did. It was a hard winter, snow on the ground, down in the teens or lower temperatures. Some of the boys got their feet wet, they began to freeze, and some of them lost toes, and I was fortunate I didn't lose any toes. But anyway, we were rescued. Then after that, our division was more or less, well, we were in, Germany had lost the war by then. And the fact of business is, I don't imagine many people know that May the 9th is VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, May the 9th. We know about June 6th, D-Day, but and talking about that reminds me to point out to you that we invaded Normandy on June 6th. The following year, 6 months and 5 months, 6 and 5, 11 months, Germany had been defeated. Did you ever stop thinking about that? What short order we made that war from June 6th to May the 9th, and the war was over. We occupied Germany, and I got, as a result of these different operations, I earned what the Army called 5 battle stars, and got a commission, second lieutenant commission. I was doing all this other as a sergeant, but gave me and the French gave me a Croix de Guerre award. I don't know whether you hear much about that, but that was a French award for the liberation of France, being a part of that. So I got, after I got out of the war, I come back to Minden, got me a job got involved in civic affairs and different organizations and so forth, and got several different types of recognition doing that. And so, I don't know, I'll let you ask me some questions if you want to, but that gives you a kind of a history of what our division did, and I was part of it, so I was in there with them.
Well, I think we learned a whole lot tonight. Lou is back here. If you haven't filled out your cards, raise your hand if you want to fill out one for the gift basket. We're going to draw for that. I also want to remind everybody on the tables, we've got volunteer sheets and pledge cards. Both of those are very vital to the museum. We need people to pledge money. We also need people to volunteer to help work. We've got different jobs listed on there, so if you would like to help, signing your name doesn't mean I'm going to call you every day, but when I get in a bind or we start working on something, I'm liable to call you. So if you would, if you can, please sign up to be a volunteer, put your phone number so that we can get in contact with you. Has everybody got their cards filled out? Blue's going to turn the hopper for us. You got one? Hang on, Blue. Okay. Anybody else?
I want to say something. I want to let y'all know that the museum is not anywhere near complete. We've got the cabinets in, they're staying, they're ready to go. But we need some help from all of you getting things into our museum to help tell the story. What's most important to us is that we tell the story rather than have a lot of old things. But we have to have some old things to be able to tell the story. So as you go through, if you haven't been through the museum since we've been working on it, please go through and look. In each cabinet, there'll be a little sign saying what that cabinet is going to be about. Be it education, be it the Civil War, Reconstruction, Coca-Cola. We have lots of things, different things in the cabinet. Look through there and see if there's anything that you might have at home, in the attic, that will add and enhance our museum. We need your help. We need you to clean out and find us some good things to tell our story.
And if you'll notice on your tables too, and also you can pick those up, we've got sheets of things that we do need and want. So if you can't think of exactly what it is, pick up one of those sheets, and I bet you've got old pictures and all kinds of things at home that we need to make copies of. This is one of my favorite people. We actually went to Halloween together one time as a couple. Father Wayne Carter. I'll explain that. I had on a nun outfit. He came dressed in his regular suit, and they thought we came together. Lou's got it right over there. Does anybody have any questions about the museum or about tonight? That you have? Our next night for the museum is going to be July 14th, and that's going to be a very interesting night. What we're going to speak about that night, Dr. Steve Kirkikas is going to come, and he's going to talk about the citizens that came through Ellis Island that ended up in Minden. Tony Elson's going to speak that night, Steve Kirkikas, some of the Michaels family, trying to think of the Morads. I've got several people coming that night. They're going to tell how they ended up in Minden, and it's going to be a very interesting night. That's going to be July 14th. And then in August, we're working on something real special too for that, but we don't want to tell you about that one just yet. So if y'all would, please go to the museum tonight and look through it. I know a lot of you haven't been yet, but Larry's going to go over there. If he hadn't already left, and open the door, I think he's already shot over there. So if you would, please go to the museum. And then Lou's back in the back. She's got our last 3 copies of Marcus Wren, Mr. Nation, and Frank Griffith. And tomorrow we will have this one for sale. If Phil gets it to me, we'll get those done. But we'll have these for sale of Mr. Turner. But I just really want to thank the Turners for coming and bringing Mr. Turner. And I'm so glad that he's doing so much better. He gave me a scare earlier in the week. They called Miss Amy called and said, "Did you know George Turner's in the hospital?" I said, "No, but they worked on your heart a little bit and he's doing good." So, but I just want to thank you, Mr. Turner, for coming out. And it's very important for us that we get all these stories documented. And you've got such a story to tell, so now we can pass that on to others. But I really appreciate you coming out. We're working on Miss Again next. She's got lots of stories. But just want to thank y'all all again. Thank you for coming.